Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, if you've ever struggled with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, this episode is for you. My friend Keith is going to be dropping some golden nuggets about how we can help get over some of those things. We're also going to be talking about plant medicine and how they may be able to help us get over some of that stuff. So stay till the end. Guys, I just wanted to give a big shout out to Celsius Energy Drink. Thank you for keeping me up and motivated every single day. I love Celsius Energy. So, Kevin, my brother, Keith, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. It was cool to find out we're both from Jersey.
Yeah, you're from
Jersey has its own little flavor. So,
yep, and you're from Monmouth County. I'm from Bergen County. So,
yeah.
So my first question right out of the gate is, what is your definition of resiliency?
Let's see here. I think my definition would be that life is challenging as fuck for everyone. We could be inspired and strong and all that, but we're going to get challenged hard. I think resiliency is the ability to move through challenges and return to inspiration. That's resiliency. If you're able to move through a challenge and return back to inspiration and fulfillment, then you have a strong sense of resiliency. And then there's a spectrum of that. Sometimes challenges will take us out more. Some people have very low resiliency and basically always feeling challenged, even if there's not that many challenges around them. So I think that's the kind of simple way to say it, but we could also go into more technical definitions.
Okay, we can go do that while we're talking. I also want to give a big shout out to Chloe. Without Chloe, we wouldn't be talking today, so I want to give a big shout out and say thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about where you come from. Obviously, Monmouth County, New Jersey. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get into this world of what you're doing right now?
So I grew up in Central Jersey. I went to college at University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Everything really kicked off at age 19. I did psilocybin for the first time. This is 30 years ago. And I got super overwhelmed. I was alone eventually in my dorm room. If you know UMass Amherst, there's these huge towers, 20 plus stories high. I was at the top, and on the medicine, I started freaking out and getting overwhelmed and wanted to kill myself and jump out the tower. But it was more of a recognition of I've been struggling my whole life. It wasn't just like random impulse. It was like, I know I've been feeling this way my whole life. It was almost like I was feeling permission to feel it. I got myself away from the window, did not jump. And then that kicked off a very long, intense awareness and battle with mental illness. And I committed my whole adult life to understanding mental health and trauma and how we heal. And so I became a psychotherapist 5 years later. I became a yoga instructor. I went down the whole spiritual route. I went in and out of working with psychedelics as a tool. And here I am. And, eventually I created an institute with my friend, who's the other co-founder, for education for professionals mostly, to help where the system's broken. I think the mental health care system's pretty broken. We do some things right, but when you look at the growing rates of mental illness, when you look at how much treatment resistance there is, if you look in the vet population specifically, we're in serious trouble. We need better tools. So that's where I'm focusing now.
Okay, so now, if we look at the numbers, that supposedly the numbers are 22 a day. The numbers that I've seen recently between veterans and first responders, we're looking at between 50 and 55 veterans and first responders taking their lives every day. So what makes the system broken?
What makes the system broken is that we got reductionist. So science has been incredible in the last couple hundred years. So many scientific discoveries. Science really works well with reductionism. We reduce things down to essential parts. And in mental health and medicine, we got very reductionistic, and we created a system based on looking at symptoms and then trying to pair medications with those symptoms. And we've lost touch of the root causes. So we really focused on how do we eradicate symptoms as fast as possible. And we started to lose the attention toward, but what's causing this issue? If we just eradicate symptoms, things don't go away. If you just eradicate the symptoms in cancer, you're going to die. Obviously, you have to eradicate the disease. We got reductionistic mostly in mental health care, especially in medicine. And we didn't focus on root causes. And so you can't treat PTSD that way. The Paxil and some of the main antidepressants that were used for PTSD, they don't work that well. So we need different tools, and we have some in psychotherapy to get to the root causes of trauma. Interestingly, psychedelic therapy can start to address some of those root causes in a different way. And there are other ways. But so I think because, we're trying to move fast in medicine, we're trying to get people in and out of the door. And it's people have been injured emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually. It takes some care and attention and some education and know how to work with that. And we're not there right now.
Okay, now, well, when I talk to people about plant medicine now, I gotta let everybody know I've been in recovery 36 years now. I don't drink, I don't take anything, but I was in the health and fitness industry for 30 years, and I took a lot of courses and a lot of college courses, and a lot of people don't realize that we have a cannabinoid system in our body. We're all born with it. And so obviously we wouldn't have that in our systems it's there for a reason. So can you drop a little bit of knowledge about the cannabinoid system in the human body?
Well, you're talking in reference to cannabis. Is that
Yep.
why you're bringing up the cannabinoid system?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be the person to talk to in depth about the neuroscience behind the cannabinoid system in the body. And also cannabis is not one of the medicines we are focused on in psychedelic treatments, or trauma treatments. It works for some people. I'm not, knocking that, but in that whole realm, like, research is sparse and limited and scarce. So I would just say, I'm not the best person to talk about anything related to cannabis, really.
Okay.
And I think we have much better tools for PTSD specifically than that. But I'm just not the best person to talk about that specific medicine.
And I appreciate that. Now, I'm very interested in what you do, because I watched a show on Netflix. I think it was called Changing Your Mind.
Yeah.
And it went back on all these different medications, like LSD back in the day, psilocybin. And I'm really interested in how these things, for a period, they were doing a lot of studies on them until the Nixon era. And then all of a sudden everything got shelved. And now we're starting to get back to trying some of these different things again, especially like you said, like psilocybin. So let's talk a little bit about psychedelics. And I think they can help. So talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll try and give a really quick and dirty overview of the history. I'll try and keep it real sparse, because
there's no rush. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. So psychedelics have been used for thousands of years. A lot of the time in indigenous settings, whether that be psilocybin or ayahuasca. Ayahuasca maybe not as long, it's unclear. Then there's peyote. So these medicines have been used for a while. Then you also see different types of psychedelics across the world being used in different kind of, you see it somewhere in archaeological findings and things. There's a drink that was used in Greece and this and that. So they're around. So I would say historically, it seemed to have been more of a kind of religious, spiritual, communal sacrament of some kind. And then fast forward now. So now we talk about really coming into 1940s, 50s, 60s. There's a Time article about this guy who went down to Mexico and tried psilocybin. Psilocybin starts to get a little known in the US. Then there's a bunch of research starting to happen in the 50s too, around LSD, some psilocybin, and psychedelic therapy even paired with that. Then we get to the 60s. So this isn't that long ago that it's really infiltrated, civilization, modern civilization. We get to the 60s, and we have this huge cultural emergence in the 60s. And part of that got linked to psychedelic use in part. And so a lot of stigma started getting attached and associated to psychedelics. And then we hit the early 70s, and we have, basically psychedelics get lumped in with these other substances is extremely dangerous. There's a lot of governmental messaging around them, and they get shut down, like a bunch of drugs did in 70 or 71. And then all the research gets shut down. So then we have kind of a dry period. I mean, it's still being used recreationally here and there. And then we come to the 80s, really predominantly by Rick Doblin under the MAPS Association. He's like trying to get research back in play, which kicks in more in the late 90s, early 2000s. MDMA is one of the ones that really starts to get some attention through MAPS. And then we have psilocybin coming online with research also alongside. And then we have ketamine that's having these small little studies being done for mental health in the early 2000s. So then 2010 to 2020, research starts proliferating around psychedelic therapy. Lots of research around ketamine therapy over time. MDMA therapy then goes through all phase 3 trials. Last year, it got rejected by the FDA when it was submitted for a new drug application. And MDMA therapy now is being relooked at. There's a lot, of buzz around it. They may just get it approved. We don't know in the next year. They may have to go through another trial. It's kind of, we're seeing what happens. And then we have psilocybin therapy in phase 3 trials that are hopefully we'll see. Hopefully they can get approved by like 2027. We have LSD in a phase 3 trial, maybe 2028, 2029. So we could have multiple medicines here available the second half of this decade. And we already have legally available through prescription ketamine therapy. So that's like the history, current landscape. Here we are, lots of buzz around it. How to Change Your Mind came out, Michael Pollan, and a number of things that created even more buzz. And so culture is moving and getting interested, and the government's actually getting interested, particularly because of what's happening with vets, the numbers you're sharing. And so we're on a resurgence or renaissance of psychedelic medicine being used now therapeutically. And I think we're going to see in the next 10 years, over the next 10 years, it's going to become a mainstream treatment. It already is used in a lot of places. I mean, everywhere I go, someone's talking to me about their ketamine therapy experience they've had. So here we are. I mean, it's a great time because there's a lot of positive research that this stuff works well. It's not a panacea. It's not for everyone, but when it works really well.
Well, I have a friend, and his name is Lane, and every year or every 2 years, he goes to Peru and goes on a ayahuasca retreat.
Yep.
It's guided, so it's
Yep.
it's just not two guys going to Peru and hanging out and getting stoned for a week. It's
Yeah.
actually a guided, something that's guided with the shaman and all that stuff. But like you mentioned earlier, Keith, like you mentioned earlier, is that when you first tried psychedelics, you were alone. And I always tell everybody, if you're ever going to try anything, don't try anything alone.
Yeah.
But he says that when you go to these guided treatments, he said the first time he went, he got rid of like 20 years of trauma just in that week that he was there alone.
Yeah.
But like you said, it was guided. It wasn't just two guys getting stoned. So talk about how important it is to have the right people doing the right thing for you.
It's super important in psychedelic exploration, in the sense that, I mean, look, people can go to do whatever they want recreationally. That's up to them. But with psychedelics, you don't know what you're going to get. And if you have a mental health condition you're dealing with, and you're not guided, you can re-traumatize yourself. You can have new symptoms emerge that don't make sense to you. You can really have a damaging experience. So I think with psychedelics specifically, it's super important to be guided. And if you have a mental health condition, ideally you want a therapist. You want a mental health, not necessarily licensed. You want a mental health practitioner, though, that is trained, because things will emerge that it would be good to have a very solid education in what mental health disorders are. And there's some people that aren't a good fit, and hopefully they'll tell you based on what conditions you're dealing with. There's really only access to ketamine, but as we have more medicines, it's like, what's the right medicine? And then what happens after you do the medicine? Things can arise and you might need extra support. Like sometimes if you're just doing it with like a spiritual guide, like they'll over spiritualize it sometimes and miss some things. That can happen. And of course there's the flip side of, sometimes in the mental health space, people will over medicalize it and miss the spiritual, right? So these things can happen. So I think it's very important when you're doing psychedelic medicine to take it seriously. It's a treatment. If you're doing it for a treatment, it's a treatment. You're trying to treat your trauma, you're trying to treat your mental health condition. You want the best support available for that you're going to feel, safe and secure.
Now you said there's not much stuff that's legal right now. So
Yeah.
What is actually legal at this point?
You can access ketamine through a medical treatment from a licensed prescriber. You can access ketamine if it's indicated for you and you don't have a contraindication and all that. So ketamine's been around since 1970 or something as a prescription drug, and it's now being used for mental health treatments. It has been for a little while now. Other than that, in the U.S., you could access now psilocybin in the state of Colorado for mental health treatment, but that's very new. That you can actually access it. It's only been a couple months. And that's a state level regulation law. So it's like marijuana, it's federally illegal, but at the state level, it's not now. And you can access that through state legal channels. Oregon has a similar rule for psilocybin, but it's more for a personal development treatment, but you can still access it if you wanted to legally. There are some kind of places you might be able to do ayahuasca through a church that is falling under protection, or peyote under protection, religious and ceremonial use protection. There is that in some places. But other than that, in the US, we don't have, and then there's clinical trials. If you got access to a clinical trial, there's a bunch of different things in clinical trials. There might be MDMA in clinical trials. There's psilocybin in clinical trials. There's DMT in clinical trials. There's some ibogaine happening. There's LSD in clinical trials, but that's, clinical trials are small. You're talking hundreds of people. That's where we are. Come a year, 2 years from now, we might say MDMA is accessible from the FDA. We might say that. or, and then psilocybin, hopefully, and LSD. So we're right around the corner, hopefully.
So when a person, say a veteran or first responder, comes to you, what's the first thing that you guys try to actually heal the problem first and then treat it with medicine? Because I know I got a great VA. I go to the VA, and the one that I go to is truly amazing. Where I see my therapist. I've been seeing her for 14 years now, and she helps me deal with the issues first and then helps with medication. Where I've seen a lot of places, they give the medication first and then try to help. So when they come to see you, what do you guys do when a veteran or first responder comes to you struggling with PTSD?
It all depends if they've been trying other things or not. That obviously matters. It all depends, if they have PTSD to a specific event, or if they have more of a complex PTSD of just being exposed over and over to many events. Those are two different animals. For specific events, you might want to try non-medicine based trauma therapy, but it's okay also to try medicine based trauma therapy too, like ketamine therapy. Until we have MDMA therapy, which will become more of a go-to in terms of for PTSD, ketamine therapy can help. It's not as researched for that. So it just depends. But like someone that's, we've had police officers, that have been at, school shootings and things like that, very traumatic events. And they can't get better, and they do ketamine therapy and they get better. That happens. We've seen that happen. So it's all unique to the situation and what someone needs. Yeah, but trauma needs to get dealt with somehow therapeutically. So it's either going to be some kind of trauma modality, or maybe it's ketamine therapy. But it has to get dealt with typically therapeutically. If you have the symptoms of trauma, you can get exposed to events that you think are traumatic, and for whatever reason you're resilient, and it just doesn't dysregulate your nervous system, and so you don't need to do that then. But if you do have it, you got to do something to get into that nervous system and get it to discharge.
Can you break ketamine down Barney style for the person that doesn't know anything? I'm sure we've heard of it, but what is it and how does it actually work?
Ketamine has been used predominantly as a dissociative for pain and surgery, anesthesia. So, in anesthetic doses, it causes so much dissociation that you won't remember when you took it. After you took it, you won't remember the surgery that happened to you. You'll be completely dissociated from the body. Usually in many surgeries, it would be given in combination with other medications, but it's used in the field, in field medics' bags in war, to dissociate someone from extreme pain. It's used in first responders and paramedics toolkit for pain. So it's used in pediatric care. Not simple, but like outpatient procedures, stitching someone up, a kid up, that it's too painful for them to go through that. That's how it's been used. But then again, turn of the century, we start seeing it works in low doses for mental health, not high doses. It's low doses where it works in mental health. It's very, very low doses. But in low doses, it causes a psychedelic experience that is not as strongly dissociative. So what does that do? So the psychedelic experiences are hard to describe. They're all different, and they're hard to describe until you've been through it. But it's in the dissociative class. You could have an out-of-body experience. You can have an otherworldly experience where you start talking about dimensions and whatever that is. You can have a very internal experience where you start zeroing into your childhood, but from sort of like watching it like a movie, and kind of you just start talking about this movie you're watching and things that you've forgotten. That's what could happen with trauma. You could sort of like be processing a trauma as if you're watching a movie, and it's not so personal. And that distance, that dissociative distance, can help you process a trauma because you're not so activated and identified with it. So that's how it can work for trauma. It also has biological properties, dendritic sprouting and causing, neurogenerative effects on the brain, connectivity between regions that were having trouble communicating to each other. There may be some anti-inflammatory effects. And so these biological properties alone are enough to get the results. That's what's mostly studied in ketamine. So it's not usually studied paired with therapy. So these results will probably happen one way or the other. Just the biological results seem to be enough. Although there's a psychedelic experience happening, you can't separate that. So what's causing the results? We don't know. But you also get that. So you've got the biological factors happening. You've got the psychological / spiritual factors happening. And that tends, for ketamine, we see up to 70% of people, depending on the study you're looking at, will have 50% reduction in symptoms within 1 to 3 sessions. We actually see with suicidal ideation, someone's really stuck in suicidal thinking for weeks, months, or even sometimes years. Sometimes in one session, they're gone. And sometimes they're gone for good. That's not studied enough to say how often, but that's amazing. We have nothing else like that. That's amazing. So that's the positive side. And then there's, the challenging effects that sometimes people leave feeling worse. They feel more agitated or whatever. But I would say, generally speaking, we see in the data that these are very, positive, helpful tools.
And again, this is something that has to be done with a professional. It's not just go buy some ketamine and try it out at home.
No. For one thing, don't go buy ketamine and just try it out from the street. I mean, I think there's so many reasons. One is it is an addictive substance. That's one problem. So you can get addicted to ketamine. And people do, and that's not a good addiction to have by any means. So that's one problem. The other is like, you're not going to use, like, if you're just doing it on the whim like that, you're not going to get all the benefit without having someone to help you process the material. And 3 ketamine, like doing it alone, I personally, it could be unsafe. It's a dissociative, you're not connected to your body in the same way. We saw that with, obviously Matthew Perry's an example of this with ketamine. But he was obviously abusing ketamine. It's a different situation, but.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but like I said, I didn't want to get any got you questions. So I wasn't going to mention it unless
I mean, it's all, it's a real thing, but like, ketamine therapy, we don't see a lot of people doing ketamine therapy specifically and then coming out and then now they have a ketamine addiction. People might, if people have a ketamine addiction coming to ketamine therapy, probably not going to do ketamine therapy, honestly. Yes. So that's a different problem.
So this is a teaching podcast. So if there is somebody out there listening that's struggling with PTSD, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice that they can start actually getting help? Do you believe in cognitive behavioral therapy? Is that something that might help?
My top 3 pieces of advice. If you never read Waking the Tiger, Peter Levine's book, read Waking the Tiger. Great, relatable book. about understanding what PTSD is and what to do about it. So that's one thing. Second thing is you got to find the right provider to help you. If you've been struggling with it deeply and you're not moving the needle, you haven't found the right helper yet. Maybe you found some helpers along the way, but if you're not moving the needle, there's somebody else out there that can help you. So you got to keep looking. That might be a therapist, and that might be getting involved with trying ketamine therapy, for instance. It might be. The third thing you got to focus on if you have pretty significant PTSD is you need to work on your relationships in your life. Most PTSD happens in relationship to other humans. You could have other things like you fell out of a tree and it was traumatic, or you got in a car accident, but like even that is in relationship to other humans. So relationship is very important as one of the healing agents. You got to work on your relationships. It might mean also, having somebody help you with that. You have to know how to have secure relationships in your life, because healing happens in relationship to others. That's why therapy works. That's the only reason therapy works, really. So that's the third factor: work on healing relationships in your life, which is obviously why that's in the 12-step program. There's a reason it's in there.
Yep. And we got just a comment from Lori, and she just talks about PTSD, and I'm so grateful that she hopped on. So she's grateful that we're talking about this subject too.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I'll say a little something about PTSD for a moment. I'm glad, Lori, that you mentioned PTSD. So I just want to give a kind of quick overview about what trauma is and why not everyone with trauma has PTSD. Okay, that's not often known. So PTSD is a diagnosis in the DSM, which is the psychiatric manual, and it came out of the PTSD diagnosis. In part, came out of influence from the Vietnam War and seeing people having this condition and not having a term for it. And that's not the only reason, but that was one of the reasons we go, okay, we need a language for this. And that's post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So there's a very specific symptom list with PTSD. Now, PTSD speaks nothing to what's happening in your body outside of these symptoms of what's happening in the body. That's what's the process in the body that's causing this. So you can have a traumatic, and that's in the nervous system. So if you have a traumatic process in your nervous system, not unfortunately, but it doesn't always look like PTSD. And so PTSD is a little misleading in the sense that there's a lot of traumatized people that don't have a PTSD diagnosis, and they have other symptoms, and it might just look like depression. It might just look like anxiety. It might look like IBS almost. There's a strong link between a lot of disorders and trauma, chronic pain and things. So we have to dig deeper and understand what trauma is, and in order to know, you have to have a good understanding of trauma in order to know, like, am I suffering from trauma? If you have the PTSD diagnosis, you really fit in there. You got a traumatized nervous system. That's how it was expressing, but there's other ways it might be expressing. So it's an important thing because a lot of people get missed. We got a little focused on PTSD, and a lot of people get missed who's dealing with a lot of trauma. And then we're not treating the root cause. We're not treating trauma. Let's say we're treating depression, we're giving them an antidepressant, but we're not treating the trauma, if that's what's there. So just want to kind of blow that open a little bit more.
Yeah, because, and a lot of people, I hear it all the time. They say jokingly, it's PTSD this or PTSD that. I have PTSD because my cat fell out of a tree, or they kind of take it lightly. Where I think that a lot of it shouldn't be taken lightly. And I was talking to somebody earlier. You don't have to be a cop or a soldier to have PTSD. It could be the average everyday Joe dealt with something that in childhood that they're dealing with it as a 50-year-old, right?
The average human being has some trauma in their nervous system. Now, I won't go as far as say the average human being is severely altered by that trauma, but there's definitely a traumatic process in most human beings that's inside of a person's nervous system. But I would say that a good amount of people, that trauma is also causing some real problems in their life. So yeah, I mean, life is hard. We're exposed to some intense stuff throughout our lifetime, and there's definitely going to be some associations throughout time where our nervous system gets stuck in patterns of threat. And that's what trauma is. The nervous system, the threat response system, that's meant to be spontaneous to an actual threat, gets patterned and conditioned to perceive threats that no longer exist. Most people have some degree of that. Then you go to the next point of many people even have symptoms because of it.
I love it. And I'm so glad you broke some of that stuff down. So tell us what you're up to and what your company's up to, how we can support your mission, and how we can get into your ecosystem.
So psychiatryinstitute.com, which is the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's website. We've got a lot of resources on there. If you're a professional, a lot of training around trauma, psychedelic therapy, integrative medicine, getting to root causes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, if you're not a licensed professional, our podcast, the Higher Practice Podcast, is a great place to go and get informed. What am I dealing with? What is trauma? What else might I be dealing with? What are the tools out there for me? What's my next step? We talk a lot about that on the podcast. So I would say those are the two best places to go check us out and get some information.
And what's the name of the podcast, and where can they find it?
Higher Practice Podcast, and it's on all the major channels, Apple, Spotify.
I'm definitely going to check it out, especially when we hang up, because I have a friend right now that's struggling, and I'm actually going to send them that podcast link.
Yeah.
When we hang up.
Yeah. Cool.
Keith, I just want to say, brother, I'm so grateful and humbled that we finally got together. I know we were going back and forth on email, but I'm glad we finally got together.
Yeah,
and,
we did it.
Yep. And I want to give a big shout out to Chloe. Thank you for putting this together. I appreciate you with all the technical stuff. I want to thank Celsius Energy for keeping me upward and keeping me motivated. And I just want to say, Keith, thank you again one more time. And I'm so humbled and grateful that you took the time to hang out with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, guys. As I end every episode, every morning we wake up, we have a chance. We can either wake up and be a victim, or we can be a victor. And if you listen to this podcast, you're no longer a victim of your past. You're a victor of your present and your future. And I thank you guys for always showing up. And remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Have a great week. Keith, my friend, have an awesome week. Enjoy it in Colorado. I'm sure the winter's about to come. So I'm sure you have to start getting ready for that cold weather.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
All right, my friend. Be good.
Take care.